And where's my record? Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Josephine Franklin, and I will be your moderator. Our topic today is just-in-time financial education, preparing students for life's financial twists and turns. Following are a few technical notes to assist you during the webinar. Can you advance that, please? Oh, there you go. If you have a technical problem during the broadcast, please call Zoom at the toll-free number typed in red, 1-888-799-9666, extension 2, and provide the webinar ID when calling support, 966-5622-3361. As you participate in today's webinar, we invite you to extend the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag NASSP webinar. We are also on Facebook at facebook.com/principals. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available along with a PowerPoint on the NASSP website at nassp.org/webinar. We are pleased to have Hillary Hunt, a financial literacy content specialist with Discovery Education, with us today. Hillary is a national expert in financial education with expertise in curriculum development, teacher training, and financial education policy. She is the lead author for Discovery Financial Services and Discovery Education's Pathways to Financial Success in Schools program. Previously, Hillary served as Director of Financial Education for Pennsylvania, Vice President of Economics Pennsylvania, and State Coalition Coordinator for the National Jumpstart Coalition. Hillary's work is inspired by the time she spent as a math teacher in Virginia. She holds a bachelor's in mathematics from the College of William and Mary and a master's in education entrepreneurship from the University of Pennsylvania. During the webinar, we invite your questions. Please submit them by using the chat feature during the presentation. Thank you for being with us today, Hillary, and I'll turn the program over to you.
Thank you so much, Josephine. It's a pleasure to be with all of you this afternoon. Thank you for joining me. I know that you have many options of how to spend your time right now, especially, and I am grateful that you are choosing to dedicate some of your time today to being here with us this afternoon. So as mentioned before, my name is Hillary Hunt, and I am pleased to be here on behalf of Discover and Discovery Education to talk to you today about financial education, as well as Pathway to Financial Success in Schools, a great financial education tool. I'm going to start off by just sort of laying a little bit of foundation on talk about the need for financial education in schools. When we think about what we're doing in academia, in the secondary school programs in particular, our goal is to prepare students for life after school, right? And I think one of the things that always hits home when it comes to financial education is it answers that question, when are we ever going to use this? And that's really what got me into financial education. As was mentioned before, my background, I started out as a math teacher, and always, the question, when are we ever going to use this? Nobody ever doubts that they're going to use financial literacy and financial education, whether it be as earners, so we are preparing individuals to make an income in their roles down the road. We are hopefully inspiring students to become savers. We know that for many students that is not sort of an innate quality. Interestingly enough, some of the research shows to us that starting that education as young as possible is important, because students and young people really start to develop some of those practices and those mindsets at a very early age. we're looking at students' roles as spenders. They have lots of, in many cases, students have disposable income and have the ability already to spend money. Certainly they will in adulthood, and they certainly influence the spending of adults now. That's anybody with children at home or that have raised children certainly can, I think, appreciate that. Ultimately, we're hoping that these young people become investors as well. We know, for example, one of the big shifts financially over the years has been this shift in responsibility for retirement planning from the corporate and the employer side or the government side to individuals having to make much more of some individual decisions and guiding that. So we want to make sure that they're prepared and understand that the power of that. And some folks will maybe that's too far off in the future, but really teaching students the importance and the value of compound interest and the fact that decisions that they make their first job out of school can really make an impact from them financially way down in the future. The sooner students start setting aside that money, investing for the long term, the better off they will be when it comes to their ultimate retirement. So never too soon to start thinking about things from that side. And then finally, just as consumers in general, we know unfortunately there are many individuals out there who are interested and willing and excited about taking advantage of individuals in their finances. And so we want to be able to make sure that we are raising students and putting students out there that are savvy enough to handle that. A lot of this actually ties in incredibly well to what most schools are doing already in terms of digital citizenship. There's some very nice connections there as well, because obviously we're thinking about the information that we're sharing online and the possibility of that leading to things like identity theft as one of those pieces that we're always wanting to be careful of. So part of what we are going to talk about for a few minutes is really just how the pandemic in particular has impacted many people's way that they think about the need for financial education. So there's a number of different lessons I think that we can take away from the pandemic. Certainly we're going to be taking many things away from an educational standpoint, a health standpoint, and others. But when it comes to the financial side, there are things that we have definitely pointed out. So access to emergency savings for many individuals, ability to control their expenses, availability of credit, making informed financial decisions. These are all very important things that have come to fruition, as well as new career considerations. So let's take a look at some of these in more detail. So last year, the Federal Reserve did a survey. They do this on an ongoing basis, but they asked adults, would you be able to, are you currently able to meet all of your expenses in a given month? Out of your current income. And 16% of those adults that were surveyed said no, they couldn't right now meet their current monthly bills. Another 12%, so a total then of 28% of individuals wouldn't be able to handle things if they had an unexpected expense of just $400. So that means that if there was some expense for $400 or more, that would put them sort of upside down, right? They would have more expenses than they would have income and without any cash reserves to be able to make that happen. So we look at that sort of level of fragility going into the pandemic, where many individuals, saw their incomes cut. Maybe some of them were able to receive benefits through unemployment compensation, but we know that for many folks that took a long time to come together and to actually hit their bank accounts. So this lack of planning, a lot of times people, when you talk about, hey, you should save for 2 or 3 months or 3 to 6 months of income for emergencies, people are sort of like, yeah, why, okay, I'll get around to it, maybe, may not. Why is that important? Hopefully one of the lessons from this pandemic has shown us that really that having that emergency savings account is so incredibly important, and it is something that we want to make sure that students are thinking about and aware of going forward. When it comes to controlling expenses, obviously when folks are challenged with income, a loss of income, being able to control and figure out where they can cut expenses, where money is coming from, where it is going. All of that sort of folds into our ability to budget, track our expenses, determining what types of things we need to spend money on versus what things are wants. And some of the data that we're seeing now out of the pandemic is very interesting. We saw this huge increased rate of savings, and we saw a lot of people decrease their discretionary spending. People weren't going out to eat. They weren't doing some of the things that they used to for a while, but that now is going back to sort of its normal pre-pandemic statistics on that with the data that we're seeing. Using credit responsibly is another big piece. I mean, there's many people who are curious and have tried to wrestle with this question right now of whether or not they should go in debt or whether or not they should try and pull money maybe from retirement savings. And so there's a lot of questions that people are wrestling with, but one of those, if you need help to be able to pay off or to be able to make ends meet in this environment, are you credit worthy? We know that lots of individuals have very poor credit. Interestingly enough, there's some research that's been done in partnership with the Federal Reserve that shows that students who graduate from, or who students who graduated from states that had a requirement for financial literacy, that a course that was required of those students, actually had better credit reports and better credit scores in the long run. So we know that there's a benefit to students who have had financial education, who have the ability to understand that the decisions that they're making have an impact for them as future consumers and potential users of credit. And then, just general financial decision making, being able to set your financial goals, have those priorities, the implications of different decisions, and being able to weigh benefits and trade-offs of decisions. That is one of the things about the program I'm going to talk to you about in a minute. We see a lot of throughout the program is, and it's very purposeful, trying to get students to understand the need to try and look at these decisions and make a very informed decision, looking at both sides of whatever that equation might be. So those are all skills that we hope that students take away from personal finance, and certainly all things that have very much, I think, been demonstrated, the need for those have been demonstrated throughout the pandemic. An interesting thing that I think might take some or make it heightened awareness as a result of this. We often encourage students to really look at multiple factors when looking at careers, but never before, I don't think, has the ability to work remotely, or who is or isn't considered an essential worker been really perhaps as important of a criteria or a factor for those who are looking at what career they might want down the road. But I think that'll probably be something that people pay a little bit more attention to, along with some of those traditional factors that we think about, like, is it a position that has paid leave? Do you have health insurance? Are you going to be covered in the case of a medical crisis? Lots of individuals getting sick nowadays who never considered themselves prone to becoming sick. Will your job have stability? Will your job still be there, or is it maybe more demand driven? So interesting things that I think have come from the pandemic that point to certainly that importance or that need for financial education, and something that I certainly have been a long advocate for, and my guess is that by your participation today, that you have an interest in it as well. I'd invite anybody that is participating to leave a comment there in the chat, anything that maybe you think is an important consideration, sort of why you believe students should get financial education, what makes this important to you, or that you're seeing in your own local school or district. Feel free to go over to the chat and inform that conversation as well. We'd be glad to take a look at that. So as we dive in, there are certainly lots of different ways to address financial education. The feature program that we're talking about today is Pathway to Financial Success in Schools. It is done as a partnership between Discover Financial Services. So you have a Discover card in your wallet, or a student loan or some other thing from them. Discover is the corporate partnership on this project, in tandem with Discovery Education, which as educators, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the great work that Discovery Education does in terms of some of its tech books, or this program comes out of the corporate education partnership side. So a fantastic partnership. One of the things that I know, I'm married to a longtime school administrator. My husband was an assistant principal and secondary assistant and high school principal for many years, is now in a district role. One of the things that I want to just point out is, I know that some administrators maybe sometimes give a little bit of pause in things that are sponsored by a financial institution. One thing I can assure you of is that as you look at the materials, you will, there is no bias. There's discussion of both banks and credit unions, for example. There is no mention of Discover in any of the student materials or anything like that. So you can be rest assured that this has been done fully 100% for the benefit of students, and you can rest easy when it comes to any potential concerns over that. So let's take a look at, and yes, Mary mentioned many students do not have conversations with parents and guardians about financial topics. Absolutely. It's fascinating, and we'll talk about some of the parent pieces here in Pathway to Financial Success, because we encourage students to have those conversations. A lot of times we see like parent pieces in materials for K to 5, say, but it's just important, and just as important, if not more so, for older students to really have those open and frank conversations with their parents, especially as they make big financial decisions. And those can be very often very taboo topics for parents and for students to have. Although one thing that we find a lot of times with financial education, especially at the high school level, is a lot of parents are learning alongside their students. A lot of people say, boy, I wish I would have had this in school. You know, I wish this was a class that had been offered to me. And so that, I think, is something that's important as well to consider. So make note of the URL for the program. It's pathwayinschools.com. That is the website that will take you to this screen that we're showing here. Once you are there, you will see that we, as educators, under the Educator tab, there is the option to take a look by level. So we're going to be focusing in at the high school level here. And we are, sorry, lost my, hang on one second. I'm just going to take a quick, my apologies. Okay, so at the high school level, we're going to find self-paced modules for students, classroom activities, and family connections, and I'm going to take you through each of those. As you could see earlier from the home page, there are different ways to access the materials. Either as an educator, this is a screenshot from the educator side. The self-paced modules that I'm about to show you have very easy access for students, so they can enter them from the student side portion of the page, or you can just push those out with the simple link to these modules. I know that's important, especially for a lot of teachers right now that have students that are learning from a distance or learning remotely. This can be pushed out through whatever learning management system is being used. So an educator, say, for example, that wants a student to participate and do one of these modules on their own, can just push out that link through, say, Canvas or Google Classroom or Schoology or whatever it is that they're using. And students don't need to have any passwords. It's all web-based. There's no need to worry about whether or not students are going to be able to access these. They're very, as I like to call, device agnostic. So they'll work on a Chromebook or an iPad or a laptop or what have you, which I think is important. More so now than ever. So let's take a look at what I mean by a self-paced module. This one is on the topic of finding money to save. So you see here, saving money. You know you should do it, but how do you find money to save, and how much should you be putting away? So when students enter this, they're going to see a little bit of an animated introduction here. One of the things that is great about this program is that up in the top right-hand corner, students can choose to have the audio on or off, and they can choose to access the audio transcript. It's interesting because I know I have a high schooler and a middle schooler at home, and when they do different things, sometimes, they want to listen to it. Sometimes the person who's doing the voiceover, they, I think they talk too fast or too slow or what have you. So this gives students a lot of options. And I think it's something that's great, especially also for anybody who has, maybe that being able to see the words as well as hearing them can be a benefit. There is a question here about, is this material free? Yes, this is completely free to access. There is no cost and no logins required. So any educators across the country are welcome to log on and have access to all of the program contents at no cost. So in this module in particular, it starts out with sort of, I like to kind of call these like BuzzFeed style quizzes, like those ones that you see on social media, like, so what kind of saver are you? So students scroll through this and answer some different questions, find out kind of what saver they are. Then they have the opportunity to take a little bit of a pretest. One of the things that is very valuable on the back end is that we're able to track whether or not students are gaining in knowledge and make adaptations to the program to meet that. So this information is very helpful. And one of the things that I think students appreciate is as soon as they answer a question, they find out if they got it right or if they got it wrong. And if they didn't get it right, they can see and view the correct answer. So that's very important for students. This immediate gratification society that we live in, they don't have to sit there and wonder. And we do a post-test that I'll show you at the end, and it is not a repeat of the pre-test. So we're addressing some of the same standards, but it's not just the same questions regurgitated again. So that's, I think, very helpful. So on all of the modules, students will encounter a short video. I'm going to play this for you in a minute. So this one is on reasons people save. So hopefully you'll be able to hear this. If not, Josephine's going to let me know, but let me go ahead and play this for you.
Reasons people save. So why do people even save money? Is it just because someone told them to? Are they afraid they'll run out of money? Well, that can be part of it, but most people save money toward a specific purpose, or better yet, for several purposes. One of the most common reasons people save money is so they can make a large purchase. It could be something they plan to buy soon, such as a new phone or gaming system, or something further away like a car, dream vacation, or the down payment on a house. People also save money to invest in themselves. Money for college, getting more job training, or opening your own business are a few examples. Other reasons to save may be a little less specific, but are just as important. That includes saving for retirement and for emergencies. You never know when you'll need some extra cash, and having an emergency savings fund can help keep you from going into debt. Thinking about why you need to save is one of the first steps you can take to improve your savings habits.
I think that one's fun because of the little sort of gaming aspect. Lots of our students are gamers, right? It sort of reminds me of some of the old school ones. So anyhow, after this one, they go in and they talk about different savings goals. So we can see these are all things that high schoolers might think about and talk about short-term goals. In this case, this is something that, asking students what they might think about. And then we're introducing the notion of a savings plan and how to create a savings plan, some different money saving tips. So talking about separating your money, making savings automatic. So when students expand this section, they're going to learn about things like direct deposit and other opportunities, including apps that help you to round up your savings or round up an expense or a charge. For example, when you charge something to a debit card, then a portion of that will move into savings. So lots of different things that are relevant and important to students. Students will find and encounter portions of this will have accompanying voiceover or somebody reading to them, but students will need to read some of the content. That's where we find that the amount of time that it takes students will vary, and some of that does have to do with how quickly or how much longer it might take them to read through. Interestingly enough, some of the research that Discovery Ed has done is that students they tend to take in and absorb more information if it's given to them in different modalities throughout. So they're hearing and seeing things and then taking responsibility for reading them. So you see they have different types of things that they encounter. There's lots of different interactions with these, some different ones where they click on different hotspots, all sorts of different topics. Here we see this notion of emergency savings, giving them a goal to have for savings by the age of 30. And then at the end, there is a wrap up and an opportunity to show what they've learned. So a variety of different assessment types. So it's not just multiple choice. There's things where they have to drag and drop, all sorts of different interactions. In fact, interestingly enough, some of our educators have said that this helps students to help sort of in a low stakes, no stakes environment to practice for different online assessments where they're encountering these same kinds of different interactive features. So at the end, after they've answered all of these questions, students will see a possible score. So somebody asked, is it possible to see a report to grade or give credits to students? So that's one of those trade-offs with this program. Because of the fact that we don't require students to log in, there is not an actual back end for this for teachers. The benefit of that is that it's super easy to access and you don't have to worry about integrating your student lists or anything with that. The quick and easy way that we have found that most educators are dealing with the grading component is simply to have students capture a screenshot of their completion and submit that to the educator. So when they capture that screenshot, I'll have the date and the time, upload that to whatever learning management system is, and that educators are using those to prove that the students have completed it. So that is how most of the educators that are doing it handle that. Another thing that is fantastic is to do this in real time with students, and you can do that in a number of different ways. You can do that with either in person or remotely, having students go through the modules either in sort of a full class session, or having them do them on devices and then pausing every so often and interacting with each other. And each of the units, I'll show you the units in a few minutes, has an educator unit guide. And within each of these, for each of the self-paced modules, you'll see a variety of different questions, places that you can pause and pose different questions. You can also use some of these questions in a summative or formative assessment of your own to engage students as well. So these can be very, very open-ended. So these, again, as I mentioned, are all there in the topics. There's also extensions, so you can extend the module, and one of the ways to extend that is by doing these other classroom activities. So within each of the 8 units, there are different classroom-based activities that can be done that align with these same or similar topics. In addition, you'll find that we have family connections. So in the family connections, these are things that can be sent home with students or pushed out through Remind or email. They're just their PDF. You can send it out, either attach the PDF or send out a link to these documents. And these encourage families to have conversations and to take action. So here are some examples of things that, to get those conversations started. Somebody mentioned earlier the challenge of getting parents and kids talking about money. So we provide them with some in some cases, some pretty easy things to have a conversation like, do you wish you'd started saving money earlier? Sometimes it's easier to talk about some of our past behavior than maybe our current behavior. Have you made money mistakes that you don't want to see your child repeat? Share some of these lessons that you've learned and what you wish you had done instead. things that they can take action on. So helping your child open a savings account, for example, making sure that they understand how to check their balance, how to make deposits using the mobile app. Our kids are going to be banking in ways that are likely very different than many of us grew up banking. And so sometimes that requires parents and adults to learn along with their child. Maybe they're not, yet using their phone or their mobile app to take a picture of a check, to do that, but certainly your kids are going to want to. And so sometimes these are things that can be done in tandem even. And then other opportunities or places that they can go to learn more as parents and further their own knowledge and or be able to have even more informed conversations with their students. So again, that is all part of the high school program. So a question was asked, are there enough lessons to fill a semester or half-year course? That's a great question. So typically, we find that, say, for example, in most states that require a course in personal finance or other places where districts require a course, they very often are those one semester courses, right? So you're looking at 90 days-ish of classroom instruction. So let me show you the way that the program is organized. So again, this is at the high school level. So these are the first 4 units. So if you take a look at each unit, you see that there are 5 topics within each one. So, for example, in Unit 1, we have imagining your financial future, setting smart financial goals, examining money habits, what have you. So at this point, right live as of today in the program, each of these 8 units, and here let me fast forward to the other 4, has within each of it 3 of these self-paced modules that I just talked to you about. Each of these self-paced modules certainly would be great for 1 day's worth of instruction. You can certainly draw that out with all of the additional extensions as well as the educator guide having those conversations. So there's different ways to handle this. It can be used, pieces and parts can be used in a much smaller duration if you just have a unit or what have you. But together with the classroom activities, the self-paced modules, and what we call these resource links. So on every page, in every section, there are additional resource links that take you to other great resources, because this isn't the only thing that's out there. There's lots of other things that can help to teach students about personal finance. You would certainly find enough, I think, to fill a half-year course. A lot of times our challenge in financial education is trying to figure out, what we're going to cover and paring down even sometimes. But that said, what we are in the process of doing is actually enhancing the program even further. And so in addition to these 3 topics right now that have self-paced modules, we are in the process of developing and launching additional self-paced modules as we go that will make sure that all 40 of these topics have a self-paced module with them. So I would encourage you to make sure that up here on the pathwayinschools.com website, there's a place to sign up for updates. So if you sign up there, keep an eye on your email because, and yes, they frequently end up in people's spams, because they're a big blast email that go out. So make sure that you're checking there. But you'll get updates on when more things go live. So for example, when those Unit 1, those 2 new Unit 1 modules go out here very shortly, you'll get notifications saying that those are up and running for you as well. So at this point, we have 27 modules that are live, or excuse me, 24 modules that are up and live. We'll be launching 2 more here in just a matter of weeks, and then each unit will continue to have additional ones launched as they are finalized. So it's very exciting. We're really looking forward to adding those because we've gotten such tremendous feedback from what has been put out already. We've had over 1 million student users access these self-paced modules and have gotten great feedback. So I'd encourage you to definitely check those out and take a look at those. So in the middle school, when we first launched the program, all there was the high school level materials. We added the middle school program in response to demand from educators to look at additional grade levels. We know, however, that in middle school, personal finance is often taught a little bit differently. So at the high school level, we're looking most of the time at a standalone course, like we've talked about earlier, a lot of times a half a year or semester long course, or maybe it's integrated along with, say, economics, or a course in family and consumer science, where a portion of it is dedicated to financial and resource management, for example, from those national standards, or a general business course. At the middle school level, we do see some of those courses as well, especially in the family consumer science side, but we also see a lot of some of our core content teachers wanting to incorporate lessons in personal finance. And so at the middle school level, it's a little bit different approach. So there are videos for teachers and students that are great and introduce different content and content area. And then we now have 4 classroom activities in each of 6 units in this case, where students or teachers who focus on language arts or family consumer science, math, or social studies can take these lessons and embed them in with topics that they're already responsible for teaching. So at the middle school level, we have sort of boiled the 8 units down into these 6 thematic units that we think sort of work well for the middle school level. And you can see here within each of these, we have, as I mentioned before, the educator video, and that's a video that's talking to the teacher as an educator. We know, especially, for example, since some of our educators, a middle school language arts educator, for example, some of this content may be a little bit unfamiliar or uncomfortable for them. So we do a little bit of support there and sort of scaffold for them and help them to, sort of think about ways that they can teach about this topic in their classroom. So, for example, in this one, there's a discussion about the difference between calling something a budget or a spending plan. It's kind of the same as talking about putting somebody, going on a diet versus an eating plan, right? So we talk about, sort of some differences in sort of the nomenclature in that one. And then in addition to these, we also have then a student video. And so you see here we have a relatable middle school student. This one, they're showing how the typical teen spends their money. So a typical teen budget is a little different than an adult's budget. Obviously, they have different spending categories, different spending needs or wants. So we don't see housing on here. The typical teen spends almost a quarter of their money on food. Those of you who have teens, probably this comes as no surprise. If one of mine was listed, they should probably show a candy bar here because that seems to be where she likes to spend her money. One of mine is certainly guilty. I would say a larger percentage of his budget. He would like to spend a larger percentage of his budget on gaming. That's an ongoing conversation in our own household. This is, really, I think relevant and applicable for a lot of students, and certainly relates to them as well. And then, so here within the classroom activities at the middle school level, the screen is laid out such that it shows the first 3. So there's another one underneath this that also focuses on the family consumer science side. But, so this is sort of like, 4 different takes on the same, on the same topic. So each of these, it would work well to show that video on budgeting. But on the math side, we're looking at, some of the math principles that are a part of that. I love this language arts lesson because it focuses on the behavioral economics component. And then social studies, we look at personal versus government budgeting. And then there's sort of a standard, just budgeting for the sake of budgeting lesson as well for that we've deemed as sort of family and consumer science, but any other educator could certainly use that as well. Again, so these middle school activities, there's a PDF of each of these. Somebody asked over in the Q&A, is there a section that has a list of project ideas? So not necessarily project ideas per se, sort of segmented out as those, but there are a lot of things that I think you can some of these activities that certainly, especially if you're looking to take more of a project-based approach, a lot of them have activities that would lend themselves well to that. So again, under the educator tab, you have the ability to look at either the general overview or the middle and the high school middle and high school level. And then within each of those units at the high school level, as I mentioned before, there's an educator guide for that unit. So in the high school, there's 8 units. So if you're looking at things, they say that are specific to credit, you can open the educator guide that focuses on credit, and it'll give you an overview of the activities of the self-paced modules that are there, as well as some of the other related resources. And so it's not necessarily called out on its own, but there's a lot in there that certainly would work for those who are looking for looking for that project-based approach. So again, going back to the middle school pieces, this is just an example. So in this case, this is the math lesson here. And, I have this tendency, I mean, I taught 8th grade for a while. I think some of these that are targeted at the middle school, I know there are high school educators that have also used them or adapted them for the high school use. Same thing with the videos and vice versa. So I would encourage folks to look at both in some cases, because you might be able to see some things that you think would work very well. So in this case, individuals partner up, and they can partner from the context of, say, managing a household budget. So either as roommates or as partners or a spouse, what have you, but they're looking at their combined annual and gross income, taking away taxes, calculating their annual net pay, and then turning that into a monthly net pay based on different careers that the teacher either randomly assigns or lets students choose. And then from that, they take a templated version of a budget. So this is one of those where they're going to have to calculate, okay, well, if this template budget says that they should allocate 25% of their budget towards housing, what does that equal then? So basically, they're just starting off with, based on this sort of starting point, springboard, what would that look like in terms of their spending? And then they encounter these different life happens scenarios where then they need to make a change. And so I particularly identify with this one. I was diagnosed a number of years ago with celiacs. Our budget for food increased. It is more expensive to buy gluten-free anything in a lot of cases. And so, that's a sort of interesting approach. What happened? You learn to do your own oil changes and basic car maintenance. You expect to decrease your transportation costs by an average of $10 a month. So different things, and these are about, in terms of the math correlation, we're really looking at this connecting with students who are practicing calculations with percentages. Okay, so they're looking in some cases at percent increase, percent decrease, obviously the percentage of a whole amount. So this is reinforcing that, but again, could be taught in or used in other settings as well. So with that, I want to take time to answer any other questions that you might have. I know that I've flown through a lot of these resources. Josephine, you were worried on whether or not I'd be able to get through all these slides. I know that deck always scares people. My number of slides always scares people, but I promise you, I fly through them. It's like clicking around a website, right?
Yeah, you're very efficient with your time, that's for sure.
So I saw a question, how can the Pathway to Financial Success program tie into existing financial education efforts? That's a great one. So one of the things that I love about this program is how flexible it is, and the way it is very sort of I guess, modular, because say, for example, somebody, maybe you're in a school that committed a lot of resources to a textbook, and maybe you're in a textbook-driven environment. That's fine. These are the program is very good at supplementing or augmenting that. I find that some of the resources and materials out there, sort of in financial literacy land, where I like to say that I live sometimes, they tend to take very specific approaches. So, there are programs out there maybe that are textbook driven, or they're very PowerPoint driven, where the teacher, delivers a specific lesson, and that's sort of a typical sort of mode of teaching. Other ones have students going in, and it's very like integrated, maybe with like Google Classroom, where they're doing lots of stuff on there. There's another program out there that focuses just on videos, and so I find a lot of times that if you just have one approach, students kind of get tired of it. And so, the nice thing about this is because it is, sort of, you can take this piece and embed it within, or you can use all of it. It really is incredibly flexible from the user standpoint, of how they want to approach things. And got another question here about how the program can be used in remote or hybrid settings. So, obviously we're dealing with, the buzzword today, unprecedented times, right? But this program, I think, lends itself particularly well to use in remote or hybrid settings. So let me talk about hybrid for a second. So school districts, I know a lot of schools, including our local one here, have taken a hybrid approach. So splitting students into, for example, an A day or an A group and a B group, right? Where students are coming half and half. This, I think, lends itself incredibly well to that scenario. If I were the educator, I would do, here's kind of how I would approach that. I would have the students complete a module on their own time when they're at home, if they have the technology access. And then my plan would be that in school, on the day that they're there, they would debrief it and use some of those, do some of those questions in Q&A and what have you. Or alternately, let's say you don't have access, or your students maybe don't have as much technology access at school or at home as they do at school. Students can certainly do these while they're at school, and then do the follow-up types of questions and interaction on the back end. So really, again, that flexibility is key. And one of the things that I failed to mention is at the high school level, we actually have, sitting on top of all of the units, is an overall program guide for the high school level. And that addresses some of the different ways that the program can be used. So I see there's another question here about, our school isn't one-to-one. Can we still use the program's self-paced modules? And that actually is addressed in that overall overarching program guide, because there's a lot of different ways that you can do this. I've used this successfully when I've gone in and as a guest teacher in some classrooms, and their only device was the teachers, and so we access the modules from the educators' laptop or what have you, and it's projecting up to the screen. And when there's an opportunity for students to ask questions, I do what any educator would and say, what do you guys think? Maybe I call on one student, we input that one student, or maybe we take a poll, or we get, how many of you think it's, it's A or B? So there's a lot of different ways that you can use this. And again, I think flexibility is, really the key in this one, is that it really is intended to be used in a lot of different environments and a lot of different ways, and it really is set up to be done that way.
Yeah. I don't see any other questions. I think I've checked chat and our Q&A. So Do you have any other concluding remarks, Hillary?
No, I just would like to say thank you to everybody for joining us today. Again, I appreciate it. I know you have many different things that you could be doing with your time. I thank you just for myself that you chose to be here with me today, but also on behalf of your students who, no matter what approach you take to financial education, certainly will benefit. The more, the better, the more time that they can have, and the more students that you introduce to this topic, certainly the better they will be in the long run. So thank you for your commitment and for all that you're doing in classrooms today and going forward.
Thank you so very much. That concludes our webinar, and I thank you all for joining us today. Have a good day. Okay. Oh, good. Thank you, Hillary. I appreciate that. It was a good session. So,
You're welcome. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day.
all right, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.